Lake Michigan is one of the largest and most mysterious freshwater lakes in the United States. And now, deep inside it, scientists have stumbled upon something unexplainable. Vast, round craters scattered all across the lake's floor. It all started in 2022. A team of researchers wanted to map the lake's bottom and look for some shipwrecks. At first, they were sure it's going to be just some typical rocky terrain or sandy patches. But what they saw on their sonar screens stopped them cold. Strange, circular shapes that looked almost too perfect to be natural. They were hiding about 500 feet beneath the surface, in places where the water turns dark and impenetrable. Those guys are huge, ranging from 300 to 600 feet wide. They also plunge nearly 40 feet deep. And there are dozens of them, neatly arranged like some footprints. But the team had no idea what these things were. Then, in August 2024, the mystery only deepened. Using a remotely operated vehicle, they got a closer look at these formations. There were about 40 of them. No one had ever seen anything quite like this before in the Great Lakes. What could have created those craters? Could they be ancient? Perhaps remnants of some geological event lost to time? If that's the case, it's weird how long these holes have likely been sitting there, undisturbed. Theories started popping up. One possibility was that they could be sinkholes or dolines. Those are basically holes that suddenly appear in the ground when the surface layer collapses. The rock beneath the surface, often made of limestone, gets slowly dissolved by water over time, creating voids underground. When the surface of those voids can no longer hold its own weight, it caves in, and this forms a hole. Think of it like when you poke a straw through the lid of a drink. Sinkholes can be small dips or huge, spanning up to 2,000 feet. They can happen gradually or all at once. Sometimes they can swallow entire cars or even buildings. And Lake Michigan sits on limestone bedrock. It erodes pretty easily when water flows through it. Sinkholes like these have already been found in Lake Huron, and they look kinda similar. But there are some plot holes, no pun intended, with this theory. For example, it's wild how they all would be so huge. It's also weird and pretty rare for sinkholes to occur in a lakebed. They also kinda resemble a straight pattern. They seem to extend generally southward, forming a loose line, which is pretty weird. If these are sinkholes, then they're definitely not playing the usual geological rules. Though it might be some new, unusual process at play beneath the lake's surface that we haven't discovered yet. There's another theory though: glaciers. Glaciers are wild rivers of ice. They covered much of the Earth during the last ice age, and they're incredibly powerful. While they might move slowly, sometimes only a few inches per day, they have such immense weight that they can reshape entire landscapes over thousands of years. Glaciers can grind and scoop the land beneath them. They're basically like colossal bulldozers. Their weight, combined with the slow but steady movement, grounds down everything beneath them: rocks, soil, even bedrock. This can create deep gouges in the Earth's surface, called glacial troughs. During the last ice age, there were lots of glaciers all over the northern US, including the Great Lakes region. If they moved across what is now Lake Michigan, they could have carved out these deep holes. Glaciers often move in a pretty straight path. As they move, they cause terrain to erode, but the resulting erosion varies based on terrain. Sometimes there are places where the bedrock is softer or fractured, and these places are more easily carved and crushed by the glacier. That could explain why some holes could be bigger and deeper than others. Harder bedrock is less affected. But usually this leads to rounded, crescent-shaped depressions known as chatter marks. Those marks are more like grooves rather than circular, big craters like those in Lake Michigan. Once the glaciers melted, the Great Lakes themselves formed. If the craters were formed by them, they may have filled with water, becoming part of the Michigan Lake, Though this theory is more like a speculation, so we need more evidence. But there's another layer to this mystery. The craters are not just curious geological formations. They actually may hold valuable clues about early life on Earth. Parts of Lake Michigan, especially dark ones, are relatively low in oxygen. It's like a lighter version of deep ocean environments that often have very little of this element. For example, hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean, underwater openings in the Earth's crust with some hot, mineral-rich water that are often very low in oxygen. But some organisms love places like these. For example, opossum shrimp. Teeny tiny shrimp-like creatures that love cold, deep waters. They get their name because they have a pouch to carry their young until they're ready to be on their own, like an opossum. Or deep-water sculpin fish, small bottom-dwelling fish that also enjoys cold lakes. They're well adapted to living in dark waters and usually stay close to the lakebed. And weird organisms like invasive quagga mussels, which kinda look like shells. These are small freshwater mussels that have spread there to the Great Lakes. They attach themselves to hard surfaces and can cause problems for ecosystems by competing with native species for food and space. All these guys could be in Lake Michigan, and even more. There might be microbes or even bacteria that are specially adapted to these harsh conditions, just like it was in Lake Huron. There's only a handful of creatures that could survive deep within these craters, and studying them could give us insight into how life once flourished in Earth's ancient, oxygen-poor oceans. That's because it's in places similar to these, where some of the earliest life forms thrived. Early Earth had an atmosphere with little oxygen, although it was much more hot, and ancient microbes adapted to this. The Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan, have always had a bit of a ghostly reputation. Like even this mission was organized to study the shipwrecks. There were about 6,000 of them in the Great Lakes. Many of these wrecks are still sitting on the lake beds, preserved by the cold, fresh waters. And shipwrecks aren't the only strange things tied to the Great Lakes. Over the years, there have been stories of unexplained disappearances. Boats and even planes have vanished without a trace. The lakes, often calm on the surface, can suddenly turn dangerous with unpredictable storms and massive waves, leading to these mysterious events. Not even mentioning all the creepy stuff people noticed there over the centuries, such as ghostly lights above water or bizarre weather patterns like eerie, sudden fogs that seem to appear out of nowhere. In 2007, they even discovered some prehistoric structure that looks like Stonehenge there. Well, it was way smaller, but still. It lay about 40 feet below the surface in the heart of Grand Traverse Bay, and it's speculated to be about 9,000 years old, way older than Stonehenge. Looks like this is a print of those who lived in the area thousands of years ago. These massive stones are arranged in a careful, winding pattern stretching over a mile. They range in size from basketballs to compact cars. But one, in particular, stands out. A boulder 3.5 to 4 feet tall, 5 feet wide. It's etched with the image of a mastodon, a creature that roamed the Earth about 11,000 years ago before it went extinct. It probably sank there during the end of the last ice age we mentioned. This period had reshaped the region. This place is underwater now, but back in the day, it was still dry land. So the stones were probably created by people who lived there, though we're not sure why. Were they used as hunting blinds? Or was it some sort of an ancient calendar? Who knows? Only about 15% of the Great Lakes floors have been explored. Now, scientists are gearing up for a deeper dive into this mystery, both literally and figuratively. They want to analyze the lake beds surrounding the craters, hoping that maybe something in the environment around them might have caused them to appear. They have initiatives like Lakebed 2030. These missions should map the entire underwater landscape. This would help us learn tons of interesting stuff about Lake Michigan and our planet's past. Who knows what other secrets these dark waters hide?
Let me take you to a place that seems to be out of this world. Life inside this cave has been isolated from the outside world for about 5.5 million years, and it does show. See for yourself. Due to such a long isolation, the conditions inside the Muvel Cave are like nowhere else on our planet. A unique ecosystem is flourishing there, even though there is a severe lack of sunlight inside the cave, and the air is toxic. The cave, located a few miles west of the Black Sea in Romania, was first discovered in 1986. Nowadays, you can only visit it if you have special permission. Plus, the central caverns are guarded naturally by narrow limestone tunnels and vertical shafts. So, if you're no stranger to claustrophobia, you'd probably better not enter this place. In the depth of the cave, the air has twice less oxygen than the air outside. Instead, it contains a lot of carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, so not the freshest air you can breathe. It's also pitch black inside the cavern. But despite, or should I say thanks to, this cocktail of extremely harsh conditions, the site is a true goldmine for biologists. Shockingly, life seems to be booming here. In a 1996 study, scientists identified 48 species, and 33 of them were unique to the cave. Most of the creatures inhabiting the cave are tiny, with long limbs and antennae that help them navigate in the dark. They have no vision and lack pigment, and it makes sense. Why would you need to be able to see if you live in total darkness? And why would you need to be pretty and colorful with no one to see you? Now, I'm going to take you to another cave. It's no less amazing, but looks very different. This is the Giant Crystal Cave, aka the Cave of the Crystals, in Mexico. These ginormous crystals were found in 2000 by a mining company after the water was pumped out of the cave. Two miners then saw the crystals after entering the drying cave on foot. These awe-inspiring crystals are actually massive gypsum pillars hidden 984 feet underground. They're anchored to the walls and the floor of the scorching hot cave. Scientists estimate that the crystals could have been already growing for 500,000 years. That's why many of them are so long and wide that you can walk across them. Unfortunately, visiting this wonder of nature is impossible at the moment. But maybe it's for the better, since the Giant Crystal Cave is a dangerous place that can easily turn into a trap. For tens of thousands of years, it was filled with groundwater, which was originally pushed upward into the opening by a magma chamber located in the depths of our planet. The magma under the cave kept the water hot, but eventually the temperature of the water dipped below 136 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, the water started to fill with calcium and sulfate, whose particles began to recombine into gypsum. And then, white-tinted crystals took over the cave. And since they stayed underwater, they were able to keep growing. You don't have to fly to space to take a closer look at a black hole. Scientists have found something very similar to black holes in the southern Atlantic Ocean. A black hole has such an enormous gravitational pull that once something gets pulled inside, it doesn't have any chance to escape. Even light can't get out of a black hole. But ocean black holes seem to be almost as powerful as their space relatives. But instead of catching the light, they do the same with water. Ocean eddies are massive whirlpools that spin against the main current. They usually swirl billions of tons of water, and most of them are larger than a city. These whirlpools are so powerful that nothing trapped by them can escape. But the scariest thing is that you might not even notice heading into one of them. These things are so huge that you won't spot their boundaries until it's too late. When scientists started exploring ocean vortices with the help of satellites, they discovered the borders of several eddies. After that, they managed to prove that, mathematically, these whirlpools are the same as mysterious black holes in space. Massive eddies are surrounded by super-tight barriers where fluid moves in closed loops. Even water can't get out from the inside of these loops. That's why tight ocean vortices play the role of enormous containers. Water inside them can be totally different from the ocean surrounding an eddy. And I'm not only talking about its temperature. The salt content inside and outside a whirlpool often differs as well. On the thin Curonian spit splitting the Baltic Sea from the Curonian Lagoon, there is one of the most bizarre places on Earth. Locals call this area the Dancing Forest because pine trees in this forest have shockingly unusual shapes. They twist in spirals and circles along the ground. There are some theories why it could be happening, of course. Some people claim that huge amounts of positive and negative energies once clashed in that spot. More down-to-earth individuals believe that the reason is geological. Sandy soil in the area is too unstable to hold trees growing upright. The most popular is the idea that strong winds blowing from the water influence the shape of the trees. In any case, experts haven't come to the final conclusion yet. Look at these underwater crop circles. For the first time, they were spotted in 1995, close to southern Japan's coast. Local divers called these 7-feet-wide structures mystery circles. The enigma had been plaguing many minds for almost 16 years until the culprit was finally caught. Imagine the researchers' surprise when it turned out to be a male pufferfish. The fish needs a bit more than a week to build one circle, and the aesthetics are obviously crucial. A male is swimming inside the circle, digging valleys in the sand with its fins. But that's not all. The fish also use shells and corals to decorate particular parts of their circles. This whole build-a-circle thing has a practical purpose as well. The way a male fish swims pushes the sand toward the center of the circle and creates a mound which later serves as a nest. The next mystery on our list is in the Caribbean. Just off the coast of Belize, there's a giant sinkhole. That's the Great Blue Hole. It's about 1,000 feet across and more than 400 feet deep. Once, a long, long time ago, this hole was a cave. But then rising waters filled it, making it collapse in on itself. The deeper you'll descend into the Great Hole's crystalline waters, the darker it will become. You'll see tons of stalactite-filled caves there, but entering them is extremely dangerous, unless you want to get hopelessly lost. Once you reach a depth of 50 feet, you'll notice that the water is shimmering. That's the invisible line dividing the sinkhole's salty top from the freshwater abyss. You might want to turn back right now. Who knows what you might come across in the murky depths? There was an old Amazonian legend that told about the river that was so hot that it boiled. And it was believed to be just a legend until Peruvian geoscientist Andres Russo questioned if the river could be real. All experts denied such a possibility. After all, hot rivers do exist, but only in the areas where there are volcanoes. As for the part of the country mentioned in the legend, there are no volcanoes in that region. But Andres Russo was too dedicated to give up. And in 2011, he finally located the river from the legends. The water in it was indeed steaming hot. Its temperature was 186 degrees Fahrenheit, not boiling, but pretty close to this point. But what shocked the researcher the most was the size of the river. One could think that the almost boiling water was the result of the activity of an underwater hot spring. But thermal pools are always small, while the river is 20 feet deep and flows for almost 4 miles. This is the only river of its kind on our planet.
Okay, here's the deal. Something is bound to happen that can affect everything we've ever known about space and time. You've heard about black holes, right? That denser-than-life type of phenomenon that usually exists in the center of galaxies? 2 of them, located 9 billion light-years away from Earth, are expected to collapse into each other. And my oh my, I do not want to be around to see that. Let's get one thing straight. Black holes are the most powerful things in the entire universe that we know of. If they decided to go all Revenge of the Sith on us, we'd be doomed. A black hole was once a massive star that went supernova, meaning that the star collapsed onto itself, and the sheer magnitude of the explosion created a black hole in its place. Oh, by the way, black holes do not pull things inside like a vacuum cleaner. That's just a popular myth. Say we were to replace our sun with a black hole at the center of the solar system. Not much would change, except that maybe we'd all freeze. Yep. But black holes can do something much worse than vacuum stuff. They can delete the universe itself. If a black hole was to follow a normal timeline, it would go from its creation to total disappearance. But this process is very, very slow. I'm talking about billions and billions of years before a black hole loses its mass entirely. That happens because they're constantly losing their mass every single second. Black holes radiate their mass away, like a boiling teapot loses its water as steam. Yet, things rarely go as planned, both in our lives and apparently in the universe itself. So it wouldn't be that much of a surprise to find out that 2 black holes are en route to collapse. That's what scientists have found out recently. And let's just say that this is one of the reasons why the scientific community is freaking out just a little bit. The first question that comes to mind is, what does that mean for us humans? Total annihilation? No need to be this dramatic. The best case scenario, we'd be in for an interstellar type of experience. Roll me in, please. Let's rewind a little bit to understand how this would happen. 45 years ago, a group of scientists began noticing a weird behavior coming from a galaxy far, far away. The galaxy is found 9 billion light-years away, and its scientific name is a mouthful, but let's just call it Super Far Away Galaxy. You might be asking yourself, well, how did scientists observe this black hole so far away if it doesn't emit any light? Good question. That's because black holes gather disks of gas around them, and they emit some of this material into space. These jets can be detected from a distance of millions of light-years. Now, if these hot gas jets are directed towards space, then scientists give these black holes a special name, blazars. A particular blazar has been gaining worldwide attention recently. Long name, but let's just call it Andy. Imagine you're a scientist at Caltech and you're looking at a blazar in your radio telescope and you notice its strange behavior. Its brightness goes on and off, like the ticking of a clock. At first, you don't understand what's happening over there in a distant corner of the galaxy. But then, you realize there must be another black hole circling the first one. In other words, scientists discovered that Andy was being orbited by another blazar, Gomer. And the regularity of their twinkling can only mean they are close to a total collapse. It gets worse. Each of the two blazars is estimated to be a few 100 million times the mass of our Sun. Have you seen our Sun? It's huge. It's already 333,000 times the mass of our Earth. This means we're destined to face something out of our league. Now, this is not the first time scientists have detected something like this. In September 2015, the LIGO Observatory detected a collision of two black holes. Each of them was as heavy as 30 suns, and an equivalent of 3 solar masses was released once they crashed into each other. And guess what? This gravitational wave passed through Earth at the speed of light. But we really weren't affected by it. Maybe you were sleeping and felt something weird in the air, but nothing significant happened to us as a species or to our planet. But that's because the blast was weak. The thing is, the expected collision between Andy and Gomer will send unprecedented gravitational waves throughout galaxies, and they will reach the solar system. But what is this shock wave actually capable of doing? Well, it could stop our Sun from releasing gas for a few minutes, which means it would stop heating the solar system. So, let's say you were going about your summer day, and out of the blue, the atmosphere froze for a few seconds. Doesn't sound too nice, huh? But that's actually a better possibility than the next one. In one of the worst-case scenarios, a blast from the collision between Andy and Gomer could break bonds between atoms and make everything disintegrate. You, me, your cat, we'd all turn into flying particles floating in the vacuum of space. This may sound scary, but scientists say that an atom is made out of 99% empty space. This means that everyone on this Earth, all 8 billion of us, and everything that exists, planets, objects, animals, are all made up of 99% empty space. So perhaps all that Andy and Gomer would do is separate all of our atoms and desolidify us. Then again, the blast could mess with the fabric of space and time as we know it. You remember Albert Einstein, right? Crazy hair? He's the name behind the theory of relativity. Einstein discovered that time is relative. It's always dependent on the observer. This would mean that time is not the same throughout the cosmos. Why though? Well, because Einstein's theory of relativity is also a theory of gravity. Einstein discovered that gravity is the effect that objects have on the fabric of space-time. Every object that has a mass, including you, me, your cat, and our planet, creates a warp or a distortion in the fabric of space-time that causes it to bend. The bigger the mass, the bigger the gravitational force, and the bigger the distortion on the fabric. It may sound complicated, but hey, this is what creates different perceptions of space and time throughout the cosmos. This is why you'll age differently on Earth and on Jupiter. This is why time passes completely different for astronauts on long missions and for people that remain on Earth. And this is why a collision of two mega blazars could mess with our perceptions of space and time, due to the sheer force of its gravitational shockwaves. Got it? Not to mention that black holes are already a huge warp in the fabric of space-time. You remember that Interstellar scene, right? Where the lead character bends the space-time continuum through a black hole? Now, don't try this at home though. As far as we know, anyone who chooses to go inside a black hole has no guarantee of making it home again. Scientists say that this blazar explosion will happen in approximately 10,000 years. But wait a minute. If this blazar lies 9 billion light-years away from Earth, it means that these two black holes should have already collided long before our solar system and home planet were born. You see, the solar system was born around just 4 billion years ago. And since it takes us 9 billion light-years to receive the light emitted from the blazars in the first place, this means that the collapse of the two blazars already took place, and it'll reach Earth 10,000 years from now. This means the shockwaves are already making their way through the galaxies at this very moment. But still, it's not something even your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren will be around to see.
If you somehow fell into a black hole, it might change your future and erase your past. Well, at least theoretically. Let's start with the real world we live in. Here on planet Earth, your past can definitely define your future. But imagine you're not on Earth, but somewhere out there in the endless universe, and you stumble upon a certain type of black hole. The one that a UC Berkeley mathematician found. Not to mix it with a regular black hole, let's call this type… what about a benign black hole, huh? So here's why you need a specific black hole. Thing is, you're highly unlikely to stay alive in a regular black hole. But according to some calculations made by a postdoctoral fellow, Hinz, from UC Berkeley, this specific type of black holes we agreed to call benign ones might expand at an accelerating rate. This is what makes it possible to survive the transition from our deterministic world to a black hole, which is not deterministic. Let's imagine you survived that passage, and now you're moving towards the center of a benign black hole. It's impossible to picture what's inside, and if you, as a traveler, could actually get into a black hole, you'd never be able to communicate to the outer world what interesting things are hidden in it. But it's not what interests us for now. We need to know how to get rid of the past. Hinz, the mathematician you already know, studies non-rotating black holes that have an electric charge. The most important thing about them is that besides the event horizon, they also have the Cauchy horizon. And here's the point. The Cauchy horizon is the place where so-called determinism simply breaks down. This may sound too scientific, but let me explain it to you. The Cauchy horizon is the place where your past doesn't determine your future any longer. So, here's a mathematically proven and apparently working method of how to get rid of your past. All you need to do is get into space, find a specific black hole, make it to the center, and get to the Cauchy horizon. However, if it sounds too complicated, you can simply try not to make mistakes here on Earth. Yeah, ideas like your past gets cancelled, you have an infinite amount of options of how your future will evolve, and all that jazz sounds as unrealistic as they are appealing. Like, imagine no one knows you failed to get into college and get a degree, but from now on, you have every opportunity to do whatever you want. But only theoretically. In reality, once you get into the black hole, not that specific one we've already talked about, you're most likely to disappear once and for all. But hey, don't be sad. I'm only talking about your current physical form. It's a bit deeper than it might seem. Thing is, there's a curious principle of quantum mechanics that can be explained in a simple way. For starters, imagine that you're not a human being, but just information. You have your experience, your background, and your thoughts. All of these are the information you are. Now, let's make it even simpler. Imagine a USB drive or a book. Both of these things contain information. If you smash a USB drive that contains music and movies, it won't exist anymore in its physical form, but the information it had will never stop existing. Same with the book. If you burn it, the information it has doesn't get burned. it continues to exist, but in another form. So, this fun theory claims that even though someone passes the horizon of events, which is a point of no return before you get spaghettified, they don't stop existing. In simple words, these universe travelers still exist, but in the form of information. Now let's go back to the black holes. According to Stephen Hawking, black holes emit radiation. Radiation makes them shrink, and with time, I mean much time, a black hole can shrink so much that it eventually disappears. So what happens to the astronaut who got entangled in a black hole if it disappears? Nope, they won't be ejected from the black hole in the way they used to exist. However, they will still be ejected from there, but in the form of Hawking radiation. But it's just a theory. Right, you remember that no one knows exactly what happens in the black hole? Another theory says that what happens in the black hole doesn't really stay in the black hole. Sounds like a good alternative to Las Vegas if all the flights for the weekends have been booked. Some scientists believe that a black hole might have a portal where you can turn back time. According to this theory, there's a white hole at the end of a black hole. If you get there, you can undo things. Like, you broke your mom's favorite vase? Hop into the white hole and it'll be as good as new there. You cooked a scramble and made a fresh orange juice, but somehow lost your appetite. It's not a problem if you cook it inside a white hole. Voila! The eggs are unbroken. The oranges are uncut and juicy again. No more food waste. Alright, turning back time sounds really cool, so I guess we might actually need a black hole to help us out. If a black hole was made in a, let's say, lab, it could devour things until it grew big enough to consume the entire planet. First, it would munch on the Large Hadron Collider, which might possibly create something similar to a black hole here on Earth. Next, Geneva, where the Large Hadron Collider is located. Then the whole country of Switzerland, then Europe. At that point, it wouldn't be long before the Earth was gone too. Luckily, if a black hole did appear, it would be so small that it wouldn't be able to do anything. Black holes actually produce a lot of energy and release it, often as heat, like a furnace. That means they will fade away when they run out of fuel. Even if a stable microscopic black hole was created, it would grow so slowly that nothing would happen. Assuming that it survived long enough to absorb the tiny particles around it, a black hole of this size would take super long to get even a pound of weight. I won't be around then. But a black hole on Earth could be a great thing. Even a relatively small one may emit enough energy to completely power humanity. We're talking a lot about food, huh? Let's not forget about spaghettification. The concept is quite simple, by the way. It's all about gravity. Imagine you're playing with chewing gum. With your force, you could easily stretch it so instead of a regular piece, you can get a long and thin one. The same happens to you. Black hole force is enough to stretch you as if you were a piece of chewing gum. Gravity holds you tight on one side, which makes you stretch. You may wonder, how come you don't get spaghettified on Earth if there's gravity too? Easy peasy. It's just too weak to do that with you. If you asked a butterfly to stretch the gum, would it be able to do that? Not likely. Their tiny limbs are just too weak. Same here. The Earth is just too weak compared to a black hole. So if you were wondering whether you'll ever reach 6'6", it may never happen on Earth. But once you're in a black hole, you can go far beyond those mere 6'6 inches. Your best height moment won't last long though. If you stretch the chewing gum at one moment, it will simply tear apart. The same will happen to you because of spaghettification.
You might have run into a black hole and not even know it. No, not a real one, like those that are in outer space, but an internet black hole. It can happen when the website you're trying to access doesn't load, or your email seems to get lost forever in cyberspace, never reaching its destination. A research team at a famous university in the US started looking at this phenomenon, and what they found was amazing. For starters, the situation of things getting lost on the internet happens way more often than you think. To help with identifying these internet weak points, researchers have put together an online interactive map, which updates every 15 minutes. On this map, online black holes are pointed out with red flags. If your message fails to get through to your friend while you're emailing each other, it may be because your wireless network has some sort of error, or even because a specific server is momentarily going down. Those are the simple, explicable cases. Others are more mysterious and harder to piece together. At this precise moment, a lot of messages all over the planet are lost to online black holes. Think about it this way. All information sent across the internet moves around like packages, being transported from one area to another, even to the remotest corners of the world. Most people have experienced getting something they've ordered lost in the mail, a letter or a package. It may get destroyed, or it may even fall off from the delivery vehicle when it was loaded during transportation. Either the transportation company or the seller usually takes the loss, simply refunding you the money you've spent or resending the product. It's the same with information online, only in this case, we have no idea where it goes once it gets lost. Here's how the interactive map works. Researchers send test messages across the globe to look for computers that can be reached. Short communication failures are ignored. These sort of problems become black holes when they fail to respond within 15 minutes. Overall, the research uncovered that more than 7% of computers all over the world experienced this type of error at least once in 3 weeks. Did this map help manage to figure out what internet black holes are? Not really, but it is a first step in uncovering the mystery. So far, it's been most useful for professional network operators who really need to keep the internet running smoothly. Another one of those internet sensations was that of the story of the most mysterious song on the internet. And it goes back to 2007, when a person posted a clip of a song on a Canadian radio station fan site. The same comment stated that the song was recorded from a German radio station some time back, but had no idea who the singer was, or how old the song may have been. The tune itself didn't help much either. It had a simple beat, monotone vocals, and sounded very similar to most 80s hits. It sounded familiar, but at the same time, it was really hard to pinpoint where it might have come from. The information about this song spread like wildfire on the internet, but at one point, no one knew who wrote it, who sang it, or even when it might have come out. It wasn't long until most music aficionados on the internet started calling this the most mysterious song on the internet. The person that initially posted the comment joined the search eventually, saying that it was her brother that recorded the song from a radio station years prior. He thought the song was nice and hoped it would be replayed eventually so that he could find out the name of the artist. That never happened. Over the years, countless people have tried to claim ownership of the song, but they've all been proven as fake. Some have even thought that the original post, looking to find out who the singer was, had no other purpose than to draw attention and create a frenzy online. To this day, no one has yet to figure out the author of that song, but communities online have helped a lot of people ever since this first case identify their favorite lost tunes. Other internet mysteries are way creepier. In June of 2011, a young man named Frank passed away suddenly from a heart condition. 5 months later, his best friend Tim started receiving emails from him with a weird subject line. It simply said, "I'm watching." Apart from the intriguing intro, the email also contained information that only the two men could have known. Sometime before, they were both in Tim's attic, having a conversation about what to do with that space. As far as Tim knew, no one else heard that conversation. Weirdly enough, the email urged Tim to start cleaning up his attic so he could finally use it. His best friend wasn't the only one that received emails from the beyond. Frank's cousin also received a message from him, talking about a broken ankle. Surprisingly, his cousin really had injured his leg a week prior to receiving the email. To this day, no one knows who sent those emails. As far as his friends and family know, nobody had access to Frank's computer or passwords. Most of them didn't believe his account might have been hacked either. If you're a fan of internet unsolved cases, you've surely heard of the name John Titor. It all started back in 2000, when a user under this name started posting information on the internet one day, claiming he was a time traveler. He claimed to be from the future, and went on to make some predictions about the future. For starters, John Titor said that he was a soldier that came all the way from the year 2036. In this specific year, apparently a computer virus had already destroyed the world. The reason why he came back was to retrieve a 1975 IBM computer, which was crucial for saving the world from the virus. Technically, he didn't need to travel to the 2000s, but he made a short detour because he wanted to visit his 3-year-old self. Over the course of a couple of months, this user answered every question people threw at him, describing the future in a very cryptic manner. He always made sure to add a disclaimer to the information he provided, stating that alternate realities do exist, so his rendition of the future might not be the one bound to happen. The most obvious question people asked was, how did Titor manage to time travel? Throughout his many replies online, he gave people a series of technical specifications on how time travel ends up working in the future. He also provided complex algorithms and even pictures of the machine. The photos were really bad quality though. Will cameras get really bad in the future? Hard to believe. At some point during his online existence, John Titor simply stopped posting. His followers were quick to assume that he might have finished his mission, and that he had to travel back to the future to save humanity. After he disappeared from online forums, a lot of people claimed to know what was behind the story. A journalist was even contacted by 2 different people claiming to be John himself. Both were a tad bit offended they weren't contacted in the first place for an interview. The weirdest of them all is probably the story of a woman claiming she had been John Titor's girlfriend when he traveled back to 1975. Their relationship even produced a boy, which, if you think about it, was technically born before his father. Most of the things John Titor predicted did not happen. So why did his story become so popular? Out of sheer luck, some would say. The internet is filled with all sorts of weird stories, mysteries, and hoaxes. Some of them get enough attention that they get rapidly spread throughout the internet, even if there is no proof. And some people believe they are real.
When you think of beaches, the first scary thing that pops into your head is probably sharks, right? Those poor guys have a bad rap as the big bullies of the ocean, but honestly, they have way fewer fatal run-ins than jellyfish, algae, and even sand. Every year, tons of people flock to the beach to soak up the sun and chill by the waves, but digging holes in the sand can actually be pretty risky. In February 2024, a tragic incident occurred when a 7-year-old girl got trapped after a roughly 5-foot deep hole she dug with her brother caved in on her. Despite efforts from bystanders to rescue her, help arrived too late. You might think digging in the sand is harmless, but deep holes can be a final exit trap. Sand is defined by its size, not by its material. Most beach sand is quartz, but tropical spots might have coral sand. The weight of the sand depends on what's mixed in. Pure quartz is pretty light, around 90 pounds per cubic foot dried out, while more mixed sands can get way heavier. When sand is wet, it holds its shape better, but when it dries out, it's a whole different story. If you dig a hole and then it dries, it's likely to collapse. The danger increases dramatically if someone is standing near the edge, adding weight and making it even more unstable. Once that sand starts falling in, it fills up all the air pockets, making it hard for anyone trapped inside to breathe. Rescuing a person from a sand collapse is tough. Sand is heavy and keeps collapsing, so rescuers need to move fast. Ideally, they've got about 3 to 5 minutes before the trapped person suffocates. If you ever get in such a situation, the advice is to expose the person's mouth so they can breathe while someone else digs them out. If you're heading to the beach, be smart about holes. The best rule is to never dig a hole deeper than the knees of the shortest person in your group. Also, it's a good idea to fill any holes after you're done playing. It's all too easy for someone to stumble into a forgotten pit, and even a shallow hole can cause injuries. From 1997 to 2007, those sand holes took 31 lives in the US, and that's just within 10 years. Remember I told you sharks are responsible for fewer lives? From 1997 to this day, in 27 years, 29 people in the US have met their early demise because of sharks. Hitting the beach only to find a bunch of algae? Total buzzkill! But while some algae are totally fine, even to munch on, others can bring serious health risks, even if you're just hanging next to them. Algal blooms, or red tides, happen when algae go on a wild growth spree. These blooms can release nasty toxins that are bad news for humans, fish, shellfish, and even birds. One of the most well-known algal blooms rolls around almost every summer on Florida's Gulf Coast, leading to shellfish that are no longer safe to munch on. Even the ones that aren't toxic can throw a wrench in the ecosystem. When all that algae eventually withers and breaks down, it uses up the oxygen in the water, leaving marine life gasping for air. Folks definitely need to steer clear of eating shellfish from areas hit by these toxic algal blooms. Back in 1990, 6 fishermen almost met a tragic end after scarfing down some steamed mussels they'd gathered near Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Swimming in those waters doesn't always pose a serious health risk, but it's still not recommended. Some people might experience skin irritation or itchy eyes. Also, make sure to steer clear of swimming near dead fish, since that's where harmful bacteria can hang out. If you start to feel weird after getting in the water, it's best to get out and rinse off with fresh water right away. You know, it's not always some specific thing that makes certain beaches risky. Sometimes, beaches themselves are just full of surprises. Take Eddy Bay or Mission Beach in Australia, for example. The chances are you'll have to share the sand with cassowaries, some of the most intimidating birds on the planet. Picture getting all set to relax and sunbathe, only to find these giant flightless birds hanging out nearby. They're like emus, but scarier. They can weigh over 160 pounds and might be a bit aggressive, so watch out. If those birds don't freak you out, then the black sand beaches of Kilauea might just do the trick. They sure look inviting, but these beaches are right next to one of the most active volcanoes in the world, Mount Kilauea, which has been erupting since 1983, pouring hot lava into the ocean. These hot waters are not a big deal compared to some Hawaiian beaches. If you ever want to take a dip at Hanakapiai Beach on Kauai's coast, reconsider that plan. The beach is infamous for its strong rip currents that can pull you out to sea in an instant. If you find yourself caught in one, the nearest safe shore is a daunting 6 miles away. Official records show at least 30 fatalities here, but a nearby sign reportedly tallies up to over 80. Rips are those strong currents that pull water out to the ocean, and they can quickly drag people and stuff away from the shallow water near the beach. Typically, they move at about 1 to 2 miles per hour, but they can speed up to 4 or 5 miles per hour, which is faster than the speed of some professional swimmers. These currents are especially fierce when the surf is big, but you should never underestimate any body of water. You can also find rips around river mouths, estuaries, and even near structures like piers and groins. They can be tricky to spot, but you might notice a patch of churning, choppy water on the ocean's surface that signals a rip current. Riptides aren't exclusive to some specific location. They can be found across the world. Playa Zipolite in Mexico, Australia's Fraser Island, and many more. Another water danger is shore break waves. Those are fierce waves that crash straight onto the beach, often right on the sand. Imagine the force of a car slamming down on your body. That's kind of what getting caught in a shore break feels like. Such waves can cause some gnarly injuries, particularly to your neck and spine, even if they don't look super huge. Hawaii is notorious for its intense shore breaks, especially spots like Keiki Beach, where surfers throw caution to the wind for a thrill. So, if you're hitting a Hawaiian beach, keep an eye on those insider waves and always look out for lifeguards. Getting stung by jellyfish is something that happens a lot to folks who are swimming, wading, or diving in the ocean. Those long tentacles can deliver venom through thousands of tiny, sharp stingers. However, to us humans, this venom doesn't do much. Yeah, it's very unpleasant. It gives us burning sensations and probably some skin redness. But that's mostly it. You won't even spot the stung area in a couple of days. Most jellyfish stings will heal up on their own in a few days or weeks with some at-home care, even though sometimes they can lead to something more dangerous with way more severe symptoms. However, if you're hanging out in the coastal waters of northern Australia and the Indo-Pacific region, and you get stung by a jellyfish, you're in for a lot of trouble, my friends. See, it's the area where box jellyfish live, and these jellies are no joke. Some people rightfully call them sea wasps or even marine stingers. They're probably the most hazardous and toxic jellyfish out there. Their sting is incredibly excruciating, so much so that some folks have experienced cardiac arrest before they even made it to the shore. Rumor has it, those jellies are responsible for taking nearly 80 lives in Australia since records started. So how do you tell who's who? Unlike regular jellies, box jellyfish got this pale blue see-through vibe. Also, they got their name because their bell-shaped body looks like a cube.
Somewhere, deep underground in super-secret laboratories, scientists are trying to create a black hole. It looks like the latest experiment was a success. The black hole hovers above the desk for a moment, but then, in a split second, it swallows it whole. Uh-oh. After its meal, the black hole grows until it is out of control. Microscopes and test tubes fly into the dark void. Soon everything in the room has been consumed. Each time it eats, it grows bigger and bigger and attracts even larger objects. On the surface, people go about their day as usual. Some joggers stop their run when they see a giant black sphere growing in the distance. Houses are torn from their foundations, and cars fly through the air towards the black abyss. In just a few minutes, the black hole has enveloped our entire planet. Then it grows big enough to consume the Moon and Mars. The black hole is now heavier than anything in our solar system. All of the planets begin to circle it before becoming food for the monster. Finally, even the sun is extinguished in the belly of the beast. Well, that was pretty bleak. Don't worry, this isn't how the scenario would play out in real life. Our scientists may actually be capable of creating a black hole, but it's far safer than this. The effort to make a black hole is led by the scientists working in Geneva on something called the Large Hadron Collider. This machine basically makes particles move at high speeds until they collide. When this happens, they release a lot of energy and create a lot of interesting effects. Scientists think that energy released by these collisions might be enough to create a black hole. Some people were so worried by this that they even tried to ban the construction of the Large Hadron Collider. Luckily, if a black hole did appear, it would be so small that it wouldn't be able to do anything. Black holes actually produce a lot of energy and release it, often as heat like a furnace. That means that they will fade away when they run out of fuel. If one appeared in the experiment, it would instantly burn out and disappear in a billionth of a second. Even if a stable microscopic black hole was created, it would grow so slowly that nothing would happen. Assuming that it survived long enough to absorb the tiny particles around it, a black hole of this size would take about 500 billion years to gain a pound of weight. Black holes could actually be really useful. One with the mass of Mount Everest would emit enough energy to completely power humanity. Even better, black holes are so dense that the one this big would only take up a tiny bit of space. We couldn't create anything as enormous as the naturally occurring black holes, though. Some can weigh hundreds of thousands of times as much as our Sun. Recently, scientists have observed a real black hole feast. The sight of a black hole tearing an enormous star apart is one of the most mesmerizing sights in the universe. Heavier and more destructive than anything else in existence, the black hole is both amazing and terrifying. And black holes aren't actually black at all. They're so massive that even light can't escape their pull, meaning that they're actually invisible. Scientists can only find them with special instruments. Most natural black holes are born as stars reach the end of their lifespan. You can picture healthy stars as giant furnaces that burn hydrogen and give off unbelievable amounts of energy. Every second, stars like our Sun produce more energy than humanity has ever produced, which pushes outwards and makes it want to expand. This is what eventually finds its way to Earth as the heat that birthed life on our planet. The only thing stopping this expansion is gravity, a force that basically just pulls objects toward something heavy. Most people know gravity is something that keeps us planted to the ground and stops us from flying off into space. The force of gravity of a star is so strong on stars that it makes them want to implode in on themselves. So, when a star is healthy, the force of gravity pushes inwards, and the energy it releases tries to inflate it like a balloon. These forces mostly cancel each other out and stop it from doing much at all. When a star burns through its fuel, though, nothing is pushing outwards to stop it from collapsing in on itself. Some really big stars make so much energy that they gradually expand into something called a red giant. When they run out of fuel, they cool, and gravity pushes the enormous object into a tiny space. Scientists use our Sun to measure how big things in space are. Our Sun weighs 1 solar mass. If a light star, like our Sun, implodes, not much happens, which is lucky if you've ever worried about being swallowed up into a black hole. If a red giant around 10 solar masses implodes, though, some incredible things can happen. The collapse of one of these is so intense that it explodes into a supernova, releasing a light as bright as the entire galaxy. Stars that are massive enough to produce supernovas sometimes become black holes. Their weight causes gravity to push down and compact them until they collapse into a black hole in less than a second. The inside of a black hole is mysterious and unexplored, for obvious reasons. One thing we do know is that they're so massive that they can even distort time. 1 second near the black disk can be equal to weeks or even months on Earth, depending on its size. In 2019, scientists watched a black hole devour a star the size of our Sun. Even though it was 860,000 miles wide, the star was completely trapped in the black hole's gravitational field. For a while, they danced around each other, gradually coming closer and closer. Eventually, though, the star was extinguished in the invisible mouth of the black hole. The black hole sometimes releases beams of energy into space. Sizzling plasma flies out at 6,200 miles per second as the black hole finishes destroying the star. About half of the star's mass is consumed, while the rest is ejected into space. Incredibly, these insatiable titans even consume other black holes when they get big enough. The collision of 2 black holes was recently witnessed by scientists, when one, weighing in at 85 solar masses, met another that was 66 solar masses. When black holes interact, the bigger one always swallows the smaller, adding even more mass to itself. The resulting black hole here reached 142 solar masses big. It's hard to believe, but this is still very small for a black hole. It will continue to consume everything around it and might even reach the size of a supermassive black hole at some point. These are unbelievably big and destructive. Our entire galaxy, the Milky Way, rotates around the gravitational field of one of these supermassive black holes. This monster weighs around 4 million solar masses, or more than 1 trillion times our planet, and that isn't even the biggest they get. It's also theorized that black holes can be made without a dramatic explosion. Big gas clouds that weigh hundreds of thousands of solar masses could condense under the force of their gravity to make a star. This object would already be so heavy that it would continue to compact until it became a black hole, skipping the supernova stage. Supermassive black holes are so far away and hard to observe that scientists doesn't have a full understanding of them yet. We don't know much about what happens inside a black hole, leading to a lot of speculation. For decades, people have theorized about how we could use black holes. Knowing that black holes distort time means that someone could use it to travel to the future with the right technology. If it was possible to build a ship strong enough to withstand the powerful gravitational fields, it would be simple. All they would need to do is decide how far they want to go and fly around the outside of the black hole. In the few minutes or hours they spent near the time warp, years could have passed back on Earth. They could be thousands of years old without having aged at all physically. Wow, that's officially a mind blower.